Hi everyone, welcome back to this webinar series. This is the third and final webinar in this series for our Pili Pala ambassadors. My name is Rachel Stevens and I am the founding director of Pili Pala Corner. This, as I said, is the third webinar in this series. So firstly, a thank you for coming back twice now and putting your faith in the organisation. I really appreciate it. But of course, it also shows your commitment to improving the accessibility of mental health support for children in the UK. I've done these introductions about Pili Pala Corner in the last two sessions, so I won't labour this point too much. But just to recap on the work of Pili Pala Corner. So following personal experiences of mental illness and going on to work in the field, the aim is to support children's mental health ultimately, reducing rates of suicide and reducing stigma by supporting families to have open discussions around mental health. And that's where the book Billy the Butterfly's Journey came from. It's for parents and carers to sit with children, to read the story and have conversations about those uncomfortable feelings. But I can't do this alone, as I said throughout. And I know that there is strength in numbers, and that's where you come in. You were chosen as an ambassador because of your passion for children's mental health. As ambassadors, you'll be going into schools, children's groups, nurseries, wherever you've got those contacts and delivering these Pili Pala Corner sessions. And they will consist of using the book as well as some activities to go along with it to open up and normalise those conversations. And in today's session, we're going to go over what those sessions might look like. Most recently, we've launched planners, a planner for parents, a planner for pageant girls, again, just to manage those many open tabs we have in our brain, to reduce, where all this information is stored. It's all in the one place, and reduce screen time as well. Again, not only supporting children, but their parents too. And thinking to the future, in the autumn of 2026, we will be launching a new children's book, the first in a new series, so similar themes, different characters. So if you enjoy this work and fancy sticking with us, you can go back to the organisations that you delivered to and deliver a second session using this new book, or third, fourth, whatever books we get to. Again, further training will be provided on that too. And like I said, there'll be more books in the future as well. So this might not actually be the third and final webinar. We'll have to see what the future holds. So to bring it back to today's session, what will we be covering? We'll firstly be going into the book in more detail, talking about key themes and kind of dissecting it a little bit too. Then we'll go into the theory behind planning sessions. And I know those of you watching this will come from different backgrounds. So some of you may have tons of experience of planning and leading sessions. For others, it may be a newer concept. We'll then go over the actual setup of the sessions. Now, again, I'm giving you an example of what this session could look like, but by all means, use this completely. But if you do have some of your own ideas, maybe you've done something similar before that you'd like to do, so long as you're following the themes of the book and the activities that you're doing are kind of evidence-based and follow the same values of Pili Pala Corner, go for it. And then at the end, we'll recap the session and the previous two as well. We won't necessarily be talking about anything emotive in great depth, but naturally, when we talk about related topics, it can bring up thoughts and feelings. As always, I'll be sharing some organisations and resources at the end, should you need any further support. But please, if you need to take a break, please step away from the webinar and come back to us when you are able to, and communicate anything to us that you are struggling with. And just lastly, just like the previous sessions, make sure you've got a nice soft drink to hydrate with and something to take notes with as well. So let's get into it. I've mentioned today already and in the previous sessions, the aim of the organisation and for these workshops is to normalise discussions of mental wellbeing and improve children's mental health. And children's books can be a great tool to do just that. Not only does reading improve vocabulary, imagination, and reading ability, but it shows children that books matter, that words matter, and that they matter. You may or may not have already read the book. Either way, we're going to look at it more closely now. And there is my daughter modelling the book. Very nicely there. So where did the story of Billy the Butterfly's journey come from? Back when we were Pilly Pala workshops, and I was delivering workshops with children around combating negative thoughts, I would often use the metaphor of a caterpillar or butterfly. We talk about when someone says something hurtful to us, you can either have a worm mentality and believe it and have that contribute to your negative mindset, or you can have the mindset of a caterpillar. Who knows who they are and uses these experiences to help them grow, to develop into that butterfly. No offense to worms at all, it was just an easy comparison of a caterpillar and a butterfly. Because as the phrase goes, the butterfly is proof that you can go through a great deal of darkness and still become something beautiful. So when it came to writing a children's book, I knew that that was going to be the storyline. A caterpillar who initially sees themselves as different from their peers, but just as they start to realise their differences are what makes them beautifully unique, they transform into a butterfly. And let me just bring these up before I forget. I wanted to use a common experience for children, so feeling different, and that can massively impact a child's well-being. And sometimes families aren't sure how to support. That's where we come in. The key themes, as I've mentioned, differences. We all go through points in our lives where we feel different, we feel we feel like the odd one out, like we don't fit in, and that can cause real isolation and loneliness. Again, thinking back to the suicidal behaviours model we went through in the last session, and how those feelings of isolation can lead to suicidal feelings. So it's all connected, it's all linked based on that research. Inclusion is also a huge value here at Pilly Pala Corner. No matter what you look like, your gender identity, race, socio-economic background, any form of difference, we champion diversity, and the book does too. Billy's friends don't care that he looks and acts different. They just want to be his friend. And naturally on there is also self-esteem. It's all very much related. Thinking about the characters of the book, so the main characters are all different types of insects purposefully. And the main characters at the Bug Hotel, so Billy's friends, they all have wings. We're talking a grasshopper, a dragonfly, bee, firefly, and a ladybird. And at the beginning, Billy is a caterpillar, so he doesn't have wings. That's his difference that he initially can't see past. And we all have our own differences. That's the point of the story. Some of us might not be able to see that as a positive, but for many, particularly young people, they can see that as a hindrance. It was also important to me that Billy was a masculine or male sounding character. As we know, mental health concerns can impact us all, but we also know that there may be further barriers for males in recognising those concerns, opening up and reaching out for support. So showing the main character as a male, it helps boys to be able to identify with the character, that it's okay to have emotions and to express them. And again, it normalises these discussions for them, increasing that accessibility of support. And as I mentioned, it was important that these friends of Billy don't actually care about his differences. They all treat Billy with kindness, reassurance, and compassion, because when it comes to self-esteem, this can often be an internal thing rather than what people are actually expressing to you. Can be both, but it's just another thing that we wanted to add. And lastly, there is tone. And by that, I mean the tone and the rhythm of which you read the book. It makes all the difference. So, of course, it's a rhyming book. There are 6 lines on each page. So the first 2 lines rhyme, the second 2, and then the third 2. Each line has between 10 to 12 syllables, so there's a good rhythm to the story. I'm going to share some pages from the book in the next few slides, and I'll kind of read it out as intended as well as going over some kind of questions to ask the group when you get to those points. So this is the first page of the book, introducing the characters, and I will read it out. Unfortunately, for some reason, it's really blurry. I'm not sure why, but if you've got the book or when you get the book, it won't be blurry and you'll see. So it starts. Down at the bottom of the garden today was a bug hotel where insects gather and play. Most of the insects were colourful with wings, but not little Billy, who had little feet things. The sky was particularly grey and gloomy. Look through the clouds and name all the insects you see. That might seem obvious to some, but I just wanted to share to make sure it had that kind of same effect. And it's that kind of rhythm throughout the whole book. There will be times when you're reading the book that you can stop and ask questions, and this is up to you if you want to kind of ask the questions as you go, or you want to read the book from start to finish and then go back and kind of ask those questions and have those reflections. The first kind of questions you can do, this is probably one that you want to do kind of there and then rather than go back, but it's introducing those characters. So can they name the different insects that are there? And again, for the younger age groups, this might be a good one. Or they can see a bee, a ladybird, a dragonfly, whatever it might be, just as a nice kind of introduction. So they're not just sitting there listening to you for an hour, you're including them and they're getting their voices heard. So then the pages go on. This isn't the next page, it's a few pages later. Billy's friends decide to throw a party and kind of shake off the gloomy day, turn it around to have a good time. However, Billy is just so focused on being different, he can't focus on the party, he can't have a good time. His friends pick up on this and they tell him, it's what's on the inside that counts. But clearly, Billy's self-esteem is so low that he can't believe this, and it's really impacting his well-being and his day and his life ultimately. So eventually he runs away. At this point, you might want to ask how Billy's feeling. What are the group's understanding of what's going on in Billy's head at this point? Again, you can do it there and then. You can come back and reflect on that. Then moving on, again, a couple of pages later, on his travels, Billy comes across Sid the spider and Alia the ant. And like Billy, they don't have wings and aren't as colourful as his other friends. So Billy feels a sense of belonging here for the first time, that he's not totally alone in what he looks like. There are other people like him, but maybe just not in close quarters like his friends at the Bug Hotel. So Sid and Alia are also super supportive about what they look like. They're really happy in their own bodies, and that gives Billy a different outlook on things. So here in the story, you could ask how the kind words from Alia and Sid make Billy feel differently about his situation. So before he was really sad and upset that he looked so different and he felt so different. But now there are people who are just like him. So how does he feel now? Then Billy moves on from his new friends, and finds a place to enter a cocoon. I am aware it's a chrysalis for butterflies, but it didn't add up to the right rhyming and tone of the story, so that's why I've written cocoon. He's not a moth, he's a butterfly. Anyway, once he's there, and he's in his cocoon, Billy has time to reflect on the day's events and really think things through. Once he's had time to reflect, that's when Billy develops into a butterfly. So it's a good point here again to ask the children what they think is the reason that Billy turned into a butterfly. Of course, it's natural for a caterpillar to turn into a butterfly, in a cocoon or chrysalis or whatever we want to call it. But another reason is that he's now ready to bloom once his mindset shifts, once he feels comfortable in his own skin and once his self-esteem grows, then he's developed not only on the inside but on the outside too, because how we are feeling on the inside often reflects how we're acting on the outside. Not always, again, but sometimes. It's important to note that it's this way around as well. It's not that he becomes a beautiful butterfly and then his self-esteem grows. The self-esteem grows and then he becomes the butterfly. And then this is the last page where Billy returns to the bug hotel to be with his friends. Even though he did the internal work in his cocoon, now he's a butterfly. He's just so excited to show off, his new colours, his new wings to his friends, that he's finally like them. But Billy's friends remind him that it's always been what's on the inside that counts. So to bring this out, a good question to ask at the end is, how do Billy's friends react when he comes back to the bug hotel? They're not, oh wow, you look amazing, I'm so happy for you. It's always been what's on the inside that counts. Now let's just, come on, join in. Because again, it's an important reminder that what we look like doesn't matter. It's, our personality, our hobbies, our values, and that the things that make us different, that make us unique, that makes us an individual in society. That's what's important. And again, it's up to you whether you want to ask these questions as you go throughout the book and get a small discussion going throughout, or whether you want to read the book in full and then go back to these pages to ask these questions as more of a reflective activity. And that might change depending on who you've got in the room with you. You might want to try it one way and think, not sure about that. Maybe I'll try it a different way next time, or do kind of a mixture of the two, whichever you feel most comfortable with, because you're the one that's going to be leading these sessions. So that's the book. We've spoken about how you can use that within the session, but let's think about the theory about planning a session. Why is it important that we are planning these sessions and not just turning up on a whim and winging it? I wouldn't feel confident enough to do that, but that's just my personality type. I know some people who would. Hopefully not yourselves. In order to really get the most of these activities and these sessions, we need to be planning what we want to get out of the session and how we're going to do it. So what is the aim of the session? What do we want to achieve? We want children to reflect upon self-esteem and improving theirs. Then the content, how the session is going to run. So we're going to do some physical activities, a book reading, some creative elements, grounding techniques. Each have their own benefit to mental well-being, and that's important because some children might love the physical side, but not so much the creative side, and vice versa. So it's given opportunities for everyone to note the ways in which that they can feel better, so that everybody gets something out of the session. And then your method. So how you're going to achieve your aims, exactly what activities you're going to do or what activities you're going to use within the session content, and we'll get into that shortly. I've lost my mouse again. So when we're thinking about the method, we are firstly going to establish the logistics. So how long is the session, first and foremost? What space do you have to run the session? Is it a big space, a small space? That will impact, what activities you're able to run. What resources will you need, like the book, paper templates, any colouring supplies? Does the organisation you're going to have them already, or do you need to bring them along with you? Then look at objectives. So what do you want the children to get from the session? What are your aims? We want them to talk about feelings and have those conversations normalized to them. We want them to think about times when they've maybe felt different and left out, but understand that that's just part of the ups and downs of life, and to not let those moments hold them back. Then we have the setup and the method. So how we're ultimately going to pull this off, the different activities that you're going to lead. Then think about any adaptations. This might be due to the physical space that you've got, like I mentioned. If you only have a small space, how can you adapt the kind of physical games? If you have children with certain additional needs in the group, how are we ensuring that they are included and get the same out of the session as everyone else? And when it comes to children or working with children, it's great to have a plan, and I'd definitely advise you to go in with a plan, but we've always got to remain flexible. So here are some considerations that we need to keep in mind when we are planning our sessions. So first and foremost, what are the ages of the children in the group? And are we adapting our session to suit those ages? The book itself, I think I've noted it as it ranges, from birth up until around 8 or 9 years old. It can go more, can go higher, but we've got to adapt our activities to suit those ages, those development stages. So we're not teaching older children to suck eggs, and we're not asking for a big discussion from our 2-year-olds. Additional needs, as I've mentioned, how are we ensuring that we're being inclusive in our session delivery? That's really important for Pili Pala Corner. We want everyone to feel included. We want to go the extra mile to make sure that they do. Can you speak to staff beforehand to see if there's anything additional that you can do to ensure that everyone is included? And again, depending on what additional needs they might be, a variety of different opportunities there. Time frame. The example session that I'm going to give you lasts about an hour, but in some organisations you may only be given 45 minutes or less. How can you adapt your session to make sure you're including the key points, but within the time frame so it doesn't feel rushed? So obviously we've got the reading of the book. That needs to be in the session. But additional activities, can we limit them? But ensure that we're still getting something physical, something creative out of the session as well. Time frames, the example session. Oh, sorry, I've just mentioned time frames. Resources we're moving on to now. So we've spoken about this as well. You'll be given some initial templates, paper templates to go off, so I'll provide them. Depending on how many sessions you run, you may need to create more, like photocopy them or what have you. Most organisations will have things like colouring pencils and crayons, but make sure we're asking beforehand in case you need to take some with you. Additional staff, will there be staff in the room with you, observing or supporting if needed? This again is important when we're thinking about the need for DBS checks that we spoke about in the last couple of sessions, but also important should you ever need any assistance at all, especially if you're unfamiliar with the children, with the building, etc. Photo permission, super important. We'd absolutely love it if you could get some photos or videos of your session, whether you're able to take them yourself or the staff or volunteers are able to do that. We would never want these to include any identifying features of children, so don't include their faces. Things like backs of heads, maybe a photo from the back of the room showing the children's backs of heads, but you can see like your face because you're facing them. If you were to get faces included, you need photo permission from the school, from the children's parents, carers, what have you. But I wouldn't want to be sharing any children's faces online anyway. So again, this is another question that you can ask or put to the organisation prior to the session. Is this something an additional staff member could help set up? If not, are you simply able to get a photo of yourself with the book stood outside of the school, for example? So that's a really important consideration, is speaking to the organisation beforehand around. I've kind of hammered this point previously, but if you do come across any kind of safeguarding or well-being concern, who is the person to share that information with? And secondly, are you able to take photos without identifying features, and would someone be able to support you in that? There are many other considerations, of course. These are the main points. And we've spoken about the behind the scenes stuff of kind of session planning now. But what are our sessions going to look like? Like I said at the beginning, it's up to you whether you adapt these activities to suit your delivery or you kind of use them verbatim. So first of all, I like to open up with a game of physical activity. I like to say this gets the wiggles out. We briefly identified the benefits of physical activity on mental health at the end of the last session. Exercise, it releases endorphins, those feel-good hormones, but as well as this, it helps us focus and concentrate. Great for our sessions. But it's also just a bit of fun to get started with the session before asking the children to sit down and listen for quite a bit. So this is a game that you can use called Butterfly Garden Tag, on brand with the butterfly theme, but it's basically stuck in the mud. It's really simple, so you only need to spend 10 minutes or so on it. You will need a space big enough for this one where children can run around without there being any obstacles. So again, if you've got a small space, how can we adapt this? Can we use a different activity that gets us moving, jiggling, even if it's just some stretches and dance moves on the spot, for example. But in this game, ultimately, you'll need to have one gardener. Depending on the size of the group, you might have one, you might have more than one, and the gardener will be what we know is it. They will chase around the other children, who we're calling the butterflies, and try to take them. And once they've been tagged, the butterfly has to freeze, flapping their wings until they are freed by their fellow butterflies. And in order to free a butterfly, you need two children to basically just run a ring around the frozen butterfly, and then everyone can join back in the game. You can have different children have a go at each being the gardener. You probably won't get around to giving everybody a go at being the gardener, though. But again, if we're thinking back to our considerations, if you have any children who are unable to run or join in, how can we incorporate them? A lot of the times in sports coaching, we ask them to be things like referees. But how could this person potentially, could it be their job to free the frozen butterflies by blowing on them instead of, joining in, running around and things? That's one example of a game that you can start with. But as I mentioned, we need to be ready to adapt depending on our space and the needs of the children in the room. Next, we have a quick introduction and warm-up discussion. So tell them who you are, what you're doing there. Then we want to open a discussion about differences, which is the overall theme of the book. So one way of doing that might be showing the children pictures of different types of butterflies. You can ask them what's different about the butterflies, what's the same. Do you think some of these butterflies are better than other butterflies? Of course, they might have their own preferences of colour or what have you. But if we think of the butterflies as individuals with feelings and personalities, then no, they likely aren't better than each other. Then you can bring in the story and explain that in the story we'll meet Billy the caterpillar, who is different, and that's a good thing. Then you can go into the story. We went through this in more depth earlier, so I won't go into it again. But again, it's up to you whether you read the story in full and then go back to reflect on those potential questions, or whether you want to kind of ask those questions and have those discussions as you're kind of going through the book. If you have time or you feel like the questions in the book when you were kind of going through the book didn't up too much of a discussion, you can have more of a discussion on acceptance here, ask some of these kind of questions. Again, thinking back to our considerations, what is the age of the group that you're reading to? If you're in a baby or a toddler room at nursery, you're unlikely to have a discussion like this because the language and understanding just isn't there. Therefore, you might want to miss out this section and focus on the story and ask questions to make them think. If there is a greater understanding, perhaps you can talk about the message of the story. Ask simple questions like who here has felt different before, and ask to see a show of hands. Who here has felt a bit sad or left out because they felt different? Well, Billy's journey shows us that even though we are different, our real friends don't care. They just want what's best for us. Plus, everyone is different in their own way. That's what makes the world go round. Otherwise, wouldn't the world just be so boring? And then you can touch upon those kind of key takeaways noted on the screen. Mostly our slogan, which is the butterfly is proof that you can go through a great deal of darkness and still become something beautiful. Then an activity that you can probably do with most age groups is a creative one. Again, going back to my earlier point, thinking about the variety of different personalities in the room. Some may be more physical, some children may be more physical and want to get involved in the physical activity. Some may be more chatty and want to have a conversation. Some may not be either, but they are creative, so can learn that way. And we've included a variety of types of activities for that purpose, so everyone is getting something from the session. And here we are simply asking the children to decorate their butterfly wings. Again, depending on the ages and needs of those in your group, it could simply be colouring in the butterfly as a reminder of the story that you just read. If they're a bit older, they can include their favourite patterns or hobbies, things that make them unique ultimately. If you have time at the end, you can share these with the group, or you can ask the children to finish them off later or at home. Thinking about our considerations, what resources do you have? Are you in an environment where, like a school, where children have access to colouring pencils and crayons? Or are you at something like a dance group who may not have colours, so you might need to bring your own? We will be giving you a starter pack of butterfly templates, like this one, and the pictures of the butterflies that I mentioned in the first activity, but we won't be providing colours, mainly because I think most of the places that you'll be delivering to will have these things for you to use. And it's just an additional risk assessment for the organisation as well. After all those activities, you can spend 5 minutes or so practicing a grounding technique. You can open this up by explaining how these are useful, how the children can use them to help them feel calm when they need to. I've included butterfly taps here, not only because it's on brand, but because it is one of the most simple ones that can be done by most age groups and utilised anywhere. So make sure we're explaining it. You know, this is the practice, and you can do it. Ask the children to reciprocate it. So you show them what to do and they do it with you. And then you can talk about when they might find this useful. You know, if someone says something hurtful to them and they're feeling really sad, they could do some butterfly taps. If they're feeling really worried about something bad has happened, they can do butterfly taps to help calm them down, bring them back into the present moment, and help them to reach out to somebody, speak to an adult about what's going on. And then finally end on a circle time reflection about what you've gone over. So ask the group if there is anything that they'll be taking away from the session, maybe what their favourite part was, just kind of reminding them what they've gone through today. So it's not just, yep, tick, let's go, which sometimes, you know, children are constantly going. So let's reflect on what we've done to remind them. And of course, remind the children that being different is what makes the world beautifully unique, just like Billy. If you have an older group, or just more time, there are different activities that you could incorporate. So thinking about like the creative activities. Firstly, I've noted one that you will need paper plates for. And this is good for older children who know each other. I've used this one quite a lot, but I don't have any pictures of it, unfortunately. So you'll just have to use your imagination. You ask the children to kind of sit in a circle, and you give each of them a paper plate, and potentially, ideally, a different coloured pen or pencil. They draw around their hands in the middle of the plate, and then they write their name within the hand. Then they pass their paper plate on to the next person. Everybody does this. So now everybody's got somebody else's paper plate in front of them. And that person has to think of something they really like about the person whose paper plate they've got in front of them. Maybe something that makes them different, but it's a great point, a great trait that they have. So you give them the time to note it down. Only something small. We're not asking for a paragraph, just a couple of words, maybe one or two. And once everyone's done that, ask them to pass it along again to the next person. Try not to spend too much time on this because by the time you go around the whole circle, it can take a while. So you will kind of keep going until everyone has their own paper plate back. And then you can ask them to take a look at all the nice things that people have said about them. Because sometimes, and this can be in your kind of explanation following this, particularly when we're having those negative thoughts, we're going through a really tough time, we're having a bad day, it can be really difficult to remember all of our great qualities. And that's when we can get stuck in those negative mindsets. It can be really difficult to remember that our differences are a good thing. So they can use this paper plate as a reminder of all those nice things about them when it's hard for them to remember themselves. Another activity is the paper hearts, one that I have shown on the screen there. Now, this, again, I've done with both primary school children and adults alike. And surprisingly, the children are much better at making the hearts than the adults are. So for this one, you'll need square pieces of paper and pens. So you can do this activity alongside the children. So you're kind of explaining how they are making it into a heart. Instructions are shown at the top of the screen there. It could be a similar activity to the paper plates where you're asking everyone to kind of pass it around and write something nice about each person. Or you can ask them to write a nice letter to themselves about what makes them unique. Another reminder for when we have those down days. I think that's what I did on with these hearts, or I think we might have made a couple. Maybe it was Valentine's Day. So I asked them to write a letter kind of to themselves about what they like about themselves. But some people wrote a letter to somebody else. I think, yeah, someone's written on there about their mum and dad, and they're going to give it to their mum and dad, which is quite nice. But for your sessions, focus on the people within the room rather than friends or family. And here I've just included this slide again from the last session, going over some of those practical skills that you can include and provide. So we've got the butterfly taps on there, the candle and the flower. So breathing in the smell of the flower, blowing out the candle. Again, just think about controlling that breathing. We've got the 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can feel, 3 things that you can touch, 2 things, no, said that wrong. 5 things you can see, 4 things you can feel, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. Then the body scanner. So thinking about that body scanner, a good guided meditation, and box breathing. So breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4, and repeat a lot slower than that. And it's remembering that different people will benefit from different techniques, different practices, and these work best when they're practiced in a place of calm, first of all. If you only use them when you're in a heightened state, you might not get the full benefits. So it's important to communicate that as well when we are explaining them, whichever one you choose to use. And then again, on the right, general kind of self-help tips and ways to improve your well-being. Depending on the age of the children, these could be things that you discuss. So what do you do to improve your mood, or that puts you in a good mood when you're feeling sad? Talk through some of these and how they can help. So that's that one. Back to the role of the adult, which we've gone over in the last couple of sessions. So again, a reminder that you will naturally flow through each of these roles during your sessions. You're a safe adult, and you're coming to be providing advice and support ultimately. In those discussions, we're giving the children a voice and we're listening to what they have to say. We're being a role model by providing those skills and techniques to help them with their negative thoughts, because we all have them. We're talking to them about speaking to trusted adults when there's something worth talking about. We're connecting with them with the tools to look after their well-being by simply being there in that session, delivering those activities. And moving on then, active listening. We've gone through this in depth in both sessions, so I won't labour this point again. But it's ultimately how we're implementing many of those roles in the last slide. It's ultimately being a safe place, being a safe adult, giving a child a voice, providing support and skills, and being a friendly face. We're not, we are giving children our full attention in our sessions. We're not making promises or keeping secrets. We're open and honest in a professional manner. And we're coming to the end of this session, so I wanted to recap what we've gone over. So we started by talking about the book in more detail, the key themes, the tone of the book, questions that you can ask to draw out the understanding of the overall message of the story. We looked at the theory behind session planning, why it's so important to be prepared. But of course, working with children, it's important that we are flexible with our approach as well. We looked at some examples that you can use in your session, and I will be providing you with those as well to take away and use in your sessions and adapt how you'd like. And then just at the end, we recapped on the role of the adult. So being that safe place, listening, connecting, and role modeling. It's about practicing what we're preaching, isn't it? And I keep saying it, but in these last three sessions, we've covered a lot in terms of safeguarding, mental health, and what your Pili Pala Corner sessions will look like. So you may have a ton of experience delivering to children or none at all. So take the time to reflect on everything that we've discussed and make a plan of action for your sessions and workshops. If you'd like to discuss anything or throw about some ideas, let me know. Drop us a message and I'd be happy to help. Or if you want a longer discussion, we can arrange a call. We have a few ambassadors coming through at different kind of time points, and it'd be great to get to a point where we could kind of have ambassador meetups in person, online probably is more accessible. Either look at some continued professional development or online sessions discussing how we're getting on, what's been working for you, any obstacles that you've faced. You don't want to be hearing my voice all the time. That peer support can be really useful. Hopefully by now you'll know what your role is. It's not to be a social worker or a therapist, it's to be a safe adult, providing advice and skills to young people to help improve their mental well-being. As I said in the last session, everything I've created here is evidence-based, backed with research. I've also delivered these activities myself and have had fantastic feedback. Of course, children are going to be nice and say that they've had a great time. But the feedback from parents is what has been really great and telling. They've said how the children have been utilising the grounding techniques, how these discussions have helped them open up and have some kind of weight lifted, have the air feel less heavier, as we mentioned in the last session. And that's the aim here ultimately. So remember, don't ever underestimate the power that these activities can have and what they can offer for children. These sessions, they won't change lives. I'm not saying that. For some children, it may just totally go over their head. They might not need it at all. But for many, it's a great stepping stone to improve their well-being. And just to end on these support services again, remember that if anything comes up, share them directly with the organisation that you're working with. If you have further concerns about a child, you can contact the NSPCC helpline free of charge. They are a national child protection helpline and can provide advice and support. If you have any concerns about a child, they can be contacted via telephone or email. And a huge drawing for many people is that you can contact them anonymously as well. Childline is another NSPCC service specifically for children and young people aged 18 and under. They have a wealth of information online, including some great activities and grounding techniques. And of course, they have a helpline that can be contacted again free of charge, this time 24/7, either by the phone or web chat. Again, this can be done anonymously, and the number won't appear on any phone bills. As I've said and I've identified before, this is a service for children, so not for yourselves. It's a great resource to have in your back pocket, as you never know when you might need it. As I've said, I've mentioned it at the end of my sessions. Sometimes I've even used, or I've gone onto the website to kind of refresh, my not necessarily refresh my knowledge, but see what's out there for children. So again, if I am talking about it, I can actually tell them what is included on there rather than just this website that they might want to test out. One thing I've not mentioned about Childline in previous sessions is that they also have a website dedicated to under 12s. Obviously, there's a lot of information on there which might not be at all relevant for like primary school age children. But if you Google Childline Kids, or even if you're just typing it in the web bar, the search bar, Childline Kids, there's the website there specifically for under 12-year-olds. Also on their Papyrus UK, a suicide prevention charity, they have some fantastic resources online for safety planning, information for parents, professionals, and resources in relation to suicide prevention, self-harm, and associated concerns. They are specifically an organisation for under 35s, but they also provide support for parents and professionals working with those young people. They can be contacted on their Hope line by telephone, text, and email 24/7. They also have a list of apps that are helpful in managing different mental health circumstances. If you're not familiar with the organisation, I'd highly recommend checking them out. I always recommend the organisation. They provide such a fantastic service and have amazing online resources as well. Lastly, again, I've included on there your local authority. So the local authority that you are delivering within, you can contact them for support. They will likely need the full details of the child, which you probably won't have. That's why it's important to share that information with the organisation you're working with so that they can do that. But again, just another resource to have in your back pocket. And then finally, a huge big thank you from me. Firstly, again, for wanting to be an ambassador and showing your commitment to children's mental health and well-being, but for also completing these 3 webinars. Well done, you. Hopefully this has given you some more information and awareness on safeguarding, mental health, and planning your Pili Pala Corner workshops. You've done great to get to the end of this session. And again, I'd recommend putting some time in your diary over the next week to go over any notes that you've made on this session. Refresh your brain on everything that you've gone over today and in the last 2 sessions, as well as taking some time to really plan out what you want your sessions to look like. For any more information, or again, if you've got any questions, let me know. I've put our contact details on there. Either contact us on Instagram, on email, and our website is on there too. Of course, if you have been affected by anything that we've gone through today or in previous sessions, anything that's happened to you or that sparked a concern, if it's about a child or what happened to you as a child, you can contact the NSPCC helpline for advice and support. If you're 35 and under and have concerns about your potentially suicidal thoughts or behaviours, self-harming behaviours, you can contact Papyrus. But absolutely anyone can contact the Samaritans 24/7. They're a great listening service for any kind of concern. You don't have to be suicidal to contact them. But a big thank you again. Do let me know when you've completed these webinars and I'll get back in touch with the relevant resources for the sessions. I hope these have been helpful, I really do, but definitely come back to me with any feedback so I can make sure it's relevant and that you're getting the most out of these kinds of sessions. But that's all from me. Take care.